Welcome to the original and the best Power Hour with Alex Burr and Dylan Hughes, members and podcast of the Running Hook Podcast Network.
And welcome to another edition of the Alex and Dylan Basketball Power Hour. Dylan Hughes, in the tradition of throwing curveballs when you expect fastballs, did you expect the Washington Wizards to lose in the fashion they did last night?
I did not. I thought they were going to pull it out, and there was two major factors that changed that. The fact that Westbrook went the Westbrook we hate mode and just couldn't get anything going offensively. And Jason Tatum being like, hey, guys, I'm pretty good at basketball, which was a shocker. You know, sometimes you forget that the guy can just drop 50 points whenever he wants, it seems like. But, I mean, shout out to Tatum, man. Like that. I mean, Kemba had a good game too. But, like, Marcus Smart got hurt. Rob Williams got hurt. Obviously, Brown was already out. Like, that was a pretty depleted Celtics roster. And he just put him on his back, man.
Yeah, Tatum is a legit young player in the league. He's going to get all, he's going to be, hell, he could make your All-NBA team. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. We'll see how this goes today. We're here today to discuss All-NBA teams. But before we begin, I implore you, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate, subscribe, and review. If you're listening on other platforms, please follow us on there. If we're not on a platform of your choosing, at me at Alex Burr4. You can at Dylan at by Dylan Hughes, but he won't really do much to help you in that regard. So and follow us on YouTube at the Running Hook. Just how it sounds. We're on there. We're putting all our videos on YouTube now. That'll be fun. And that's it for the little plug section there. Dylan Hughes, before we begin, we did All NBA at the halfway point of the season. I'm curious, how many of the guys on your All NBA team at the halfway point did you have on this version of the team?
It's pretty close, I would say. There's been, I think, 3 guys that I've exchanged, but it's fairly close. Like I was talking, which is not out yet, but the Divine Rhyme we were at the end talking about. I'm like, this was an interesting year because 4 staples, LeBron, AD, Harden, and KD, did not qualify for games. So guys that were always going to make it did not make it. So it made it a little bit interesting. I wouldn't say it was tougher. I think it actually helped get some guys I wanted to get on, but it was just different.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and read the guys I did not have on my team that I had the first time. So I didn't have, obviously the guys you mentioned with KD, LeBron, Harden, and AD. I actually didn't have AD on my first time because he didn't play at all in the first half, and he hasn't barely played really in the second half. So I had Ben Simmons on my first edition. He's not on this time. I had Jaylen Brown on my first edition. He's not on this time. I had Bam Adebayo on my first edition. He's not on this time. So I think that it'll be an interesting rundown to see. So I have 6 guys changing teams this time, basically. So it'll be curious to see how we break our teams down. Why don't we just start with the first team guards? Well, okay, wait. First of all, Jokic and Steph, obvious first team guys, right? And I suppose I should ask this question: did you go with Embiid at forward, or did you have him as a center?
Yeah, I went with center. Like I know with the all defense team, I did some finagling to get Bam on there at forward. But I'm not going to do that. Like it's, as much as I hate the positions, and, Embiid would probably be on the first team otherwise if positions weren't an issue, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I also didn't have him as a forward, so that means we both have him as our second team center. That knocks off one guy on our list. So we both have Steph and Jokic on the first team. Who's your other guard on the first team All-NBA?
So this was one of the tougher decisions I had to make. It was between Dame and Luka. And Dame was the first time around, and I ultimately went with Dame again because I was just thinking about it. So the teams ended with the same records. So that made it even tougher. It's like you can't even go back to like, well, who had the best record? I just looked at it, and I think you could probably say that Luka probably had the better all-around stats, even though this was probably Dame's best season stat-wise. I just looked at it as Dame had way more issues. Like the Mavericks, aside from Porzingis, have been healthy all year. They really haven't had any problems. Like they've been pretty like fully loaded as far as health goes. And as we've talked about a bunch already on this pod, Portland has not had the same luck. I mean, literally every single person on the team that is good, except for maybe Covington, like missed time. I mean, Nurkic missed time, McCollum missed time. They didn't get Norm Powell until mid-season, and obviously that addition has helped them a bunch. But, I mean, Dame has had to do a lot of backpacking, if you will. Like, there's been a lot of pressure he's been under, and this is not the first time we've seen it either. So I just ultimately felt like rewarding his warrior spirit was necessary.
So I went with a little bit of a cop-out, Dylan. I did have Dame as my first guard. I also had Luka at forward.
Okay.
And this is my thing with Luka, right? I think Luka legitimately deserves a first team All-NBA spot this year. He's played 66 games. He's at 29, or he's at 28, 8-8, basically. And then the forward class to me just wasn't as inspiring as the guards were this year. Like I felt like there were a lot more deserving guards than there were forwards. Like think about it, right? I'll just go ahead and list some of the guys I left off my guard team. Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Trey Young, right? You just go down the line. There's like probably 10, 11 deserving guards to make the All-NBA team. And there's only 6 spots for each forward and guard. But like the forwards gets to slim pickings after a certain point. Like I did have one hard spot for forward, but that last spot was a lot less hard, I'll say, than the last forward spot. But Dame, I feel like Dame definitely deserved all NBA first team. And he is like, he kept that team afloat through the shit. And now they're on the other side. And I would not be shocked at all if Portland destroyed Denver in the next round, just because their offense is so potent. And Nurkic and Covington, they can just kind of wreak havoc on the help side, which is more important against Denver, I'd say, than probably any other team. So, I mean, do you have any objections to me having Luka as a forward?
No, I don't, because again, he's one of those guys that's tough to pin down exactly what position he is, because his size would suggest he's a forward, but he's the main ball handler. He's in a growing group of guys like that. If you look at Giannis and Harden and LeBron and those type of guys. So I'll give it to you for sure. And guard is really deep. And in my honorable mentions, we'll get to that. But, as you said, forward was a little bit lighter. So I'll give it to you for sure.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. I'll be curious to see how we have the forwards moving forward. Any thoughts on Steph and Jokic? I feel like we've talked about them each a lot this year. So I feel like maybe we can kind of skip over our thoughts on them. But I mean, shout out to Steph for leading the league in scoring on 12 3-point attempts a game and making 42% of them. That's an absolutely ridiculous efficiency. And then Jokic has just been undeniable this year. So any thoughts on those two guys before we move on to your forwards?
I mean, they're the top 2 MVP candidates, and like they've gotten all the buzz this year because of that. So yeah, we talked about them a lot last time. So I feel like everything that needs to be said has been said.
Yes, especially on Jokic. This is a very pro Jokic podcast. So let's do your forwards. So I obviously had Luka as my first forward. Who are your 2 forwards?
So I went with Giannis and Kawhi. It's just with LeBron and KD not in there, for me personally, it was just pretty easy to slide those 2 in there. And, we talked about Giannis last week on the all defense pod, and we talked about Kawhi too. I would say this, I think Kawhi has been kind of overlooked this year and how good he's been. I mean, I don't have his stats pulled up right now, but I think he's like averaging a career high in points last time I checked. So he's had a great year. And again, like it's kind of odd that the Clippers have been he's not having a career high, but he's having his most efficient year, 51% from the field. Like that's pretty impressive considering, he's shooting 5 threes a game. Like it's becoming more and more rare to see, perimeter guys shoot above 50% because the threes, like when you shoot more threes, it's obviously going to bring your percentage down because a good average from 3 is like 40%. And if you say that compared to field goal percentage, it's nothing. But, I just think Kawhi has been just really solid all around this year. And I mean, he's already been, but I think over the past few years, he's really proven to be one of the better scorers in the league, which is just surprising because he was, he didn't average above 20 points until his 5th season. Like it's been a slow kind of build up to this. But the past few years, he's just been so good on offense. And I think in the playoffs, we're going to see the Clippers are almost a bit of a sleeping giant at this point because they've had so many injuries this year, including Kawhi. But when Kawhi has been on the floor, he's just been amazing.
Yeah, Kawhi was the first forward on my second team. I mean, it was really, I hated leaving him off. It was between Luka, Kawhi, and Jimmy for that other forward spot. And I think that Kawhi, what you're saying about the efficiency is very true. And that's for a perimeter player, especially 49% of his shots are from the mid range. Like 49% of his shots are from 4 feet and deep, like between 4 and 23 feet. Like that's crazy that he's above 50%, but he's just like the shot making for him has just been on another level this year. The sleeping giant point about the Clippers is very correct. It's why I asked you, are we sure they're not the favorites in the West? Like during Clippers week, because I think that Kawhi and Paul George, who was very deserving of all NBA spot. I'm not sure if you had Paul George. I didn't, but it's very like those two are playing, I would say, some of the best basketball either of them have played. And we've seen them play very elite basketball. So I'm very curious to see how the Clippers go down in the playoffs. And then I had Giannis too. And Giannis, I think this is Giannis's best season. I know we say that every year, but he's just hit another level this year offensively. And we talked about the defense last week and how it kind of fell off. But I still think, this level of offense and that level of like the rim protection he can bring. I mean, you wouldn't be crazy if you said he's the best player in the East. I wouldn't agree with you, but it's not an outlandish take at all.
What's funny is we talked about how his defense fell off, and yet he still made the all-defense team. And I think that is a good example of how dominant he is. And when Bud finally puts him at the 5 for more than a handful of possessions a game, which I think he will in the playoffs, we're going to start to see. And I am so happy they get Miami the first round because I don't think Bud has an option but to put him at the 5. If you have him and Brook Lopez out there against Bam, I don't want to say it's game over, but man, it's going to be tough. And the thing is, like, you can put Giannis at the 5, or as we talked about before, Bobby Portis, which basically makes Bobby Portis is like a pseudo center, really. And he plays more as like a perimeter guy anyway. But Bobby Portis has been so good this year. And I just really want Giannis down low as much as possible in the playoffs because I think they can make a really good run if you put Giannis down low. Because as we've discussed, and I'll never let this go until it happens, but he's modern day Shaq, man. And modern day Shaq back in the day was not handling the ball from the perimeter and trying to work his way down.
Yeah, we need 16 feet and in from Giannis. We don't need, 3-point and in. We need 16 feet and in. Get him a touch at the elbow, maybe even the elbow extended. Elbow extended, I know, is 17 feet. So let's just say 17 feet and in. But an inside player, he just needs to be an inside player. He needs to have a Zion kind of shot diet. And I don't understand why. He could easily pull that off. Like the length he has. I like the mid-range flashes he's showing. if he has a mid-range jumper, then it's probably over for the league. And we'll see this offseason. But I've liked what I've seen from his mid-range this year from what we've seen from the Bucks. So I'm really excited to see that kind of progression in the playoffs. We already said Jokic was each of our first team centers. So I think that was kind of obvious. And like Dylan said, we've already talked about Jokic enough. I pulled up Giannis's cleaning the glass page real quick. So on short mid-ranges, he is at 36%. Or at 35%, but on 237 attempts. So he's taking it, and that's probably the range he needs to be in. And then on long mid ranges, he's actually at 38%. So pretty good progression from Giannis. Time for the second team guards. Dylan Hughes, who did you have for your second team guards? And this is where I think the differences will get interesting. So you obviously have Luka as one. Who's your other second team guard?
Yeah, so I actually think this might have been my team last time. I don't remember how I had it, but I went with Luka and Kyrie. It's just Kyrie, I felt needed to be rewarded for, first of all, having his best season, another above 50% field goal percentage, but even more impressive than Kawhi because he shot 7 3-point attempts a game. So he was just magnificent from 2, 56% from 2. Like we raged on all year about Zach LaVine's efficiency from 2, and he still ended up better than Kyrie just slightly, but 56% from 2 is pretty impressive. And Kyrie has been he's been an efficient 2-point shooter for a while now. And, we always talk about guard efficiency, and a lot of these guys are shooting lower 40s, and like you give it to them, because again, there's a lot of 3 points going up, but Kyrie, like, aside from Steph, might be the most efficient guy, the most efficient point guard in the league. Like, I'd have to do a landscape around the league and see. But, I mean, this guy is just a great shot maker. And the Nets have just had a turbulent year, man. Like, even without Harden and KD at times, like, they still have a really good roster. So it's not like Kyrie is doing everything himself. But I just think he's been tremendous this year. I think he's been the most locked in he's ever been. Like this seems like it's the happiest he's been in a few years. So it's been really nice to watch. And I just think he's been awesome this year.
There's a little bit of synergy here because I also had Kyrie as my my second team guard. And I'll talk about my other one in a second, but Kyrie is a member of the 50-40-90 club. And for all the more statistical barriers that we've been able to accomplish in this era of NBA, right? Like more guys, getting up to that 60-point barrier, 50 sometimes doesn't even feel special anymore. Kind of like, no hitters in baseball, but you have 50-40-90 and it's only happened 9 times in NBA history. Right. And Kyrie's at 50.6, 40.2, and then 92% from the line. Like just the epitome of efficiency this year. So, I mean, the only complaint you could have is that he didn't get to the foul line enough, but Kyrie's never been a massive, get to the foul line 18 times in a game, he avoids contact more than seeks it. And that's always I watched Derrick Rose in Chicago, and that always worked to his impediment rather than his benefit. So, but Kyrie's so good at finishing, it doesn't matter that he doesn't draw fouls. And I think that's, they have 2 guys on their team that's like that. And they have Kevin Durant and they have Kyrie, that they're so good at scoring the ball. It doesn't matter that they don't get to the foul line. And I think Kyrie, if Kyrie was the best guy on your team and he didn't get to the foul line, that would be a problem. But as he's the 3rd best guy on the team. And the fact that he's doing this efficiently, I think he deserves a lot of props, and he deserves a lot of props for playing, 54 games. Kyrie's not always stay healthy kind of guy. Kyrie's had a lot of injury issues in the past. So I'm really glad that Kyrie was able to stay healthy this year.
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest thing is the injuries. Like he's been the healthiest guy, and that's just always been his downfall is really injuries. It's looking forward as far as value. Because he's been traded. He got traded once and then he left in free agency. But he's been a guy that's kind of been in trade discussions a little bit. And it's he's an injury risk, so it's something that you got to look out for and cook that into his value. But this year he's he's been healthier than most stars in the league. And, he still only played 54 games, but like he had some personal issues before the Harden trade. And a lot of the missed games were earlier in the year. But yeah, I mean, being healthy was the biggest thing. And obviously coming up in the playoffs is going to continue to be a big deal for them.
Yeah, it's going to be huge for them because they've played like 8 games together all year, I think. And that's going to be like of paramount importance, is just to be able to gel, and be like, hey, we just need to gel on the offensive and defensive end. We just need to be able to get stops. I can't wait, if Milwaukee wins, I can't wait to see Giannis average 40 points a game against them in the semis. That might happen, Dylan. It might happen where he averages legit 35 points a game because they can't stop him. And I want to see that because that would be scoring theater.
Yeah, I don't think might is a necessary word right there. Like, especially if you drop it down to 35 for sure. I mean, we saw they played the Nets twice in the past month. And Giannis, at least one time, I think, had 40 plus. He had like almost 50 in the first game. The game that went to overtime. Like we talked about this because we talked about the Bucks and Nets matchup. How, like, I think the Bucks, of all these top teams, I think the Bucks have the best chance of beating Brooklyn because they have the offense and defense to match. And if you play small ball with Giannis at 5, it's going to be really, really tough for the Nets to stop them. Like, it's going to be a high-scoring game because, again, man, it's like, what options do they have? Jeff Green is not going to stop Giannis. We know DeAndre Jordan's not. Nick Claxton, we love him, probably not going to be able to do it. So, yeah, I think that, like, it's going to be such an exciting playoffs, man. Like, the way these matchups are set up right now, I mean, the Bucks versus the Heat and then potentially the Bucks versus the Nets, that's a great 2 rounds right there.
So, okay. So Giannis's games against the Nets this year. So the first, I guess I'm going out of order here. The first one, he scored 34. And then he scored 49 and 36. And he shot a lot in those games. Like, we don't think of Giannis as a guy that shoots a whole lot. But in those games, it was 26 field goal attempts, 36 and 30. Right? If you can't stop him from shooting 30 times a game, that's going to be a legit problem. But at the same time, if the Nets gel, it might be in the Nets' best interest for the Celtics series to go 6 games, just so they have more actual reps together. But I don't think the Celtics have enough firepower to hang in that series at this point. But man, that's going to be tough. My other second team guard was Chris Paul, and that was the main benefit of bumping Luka to forward, was that I could put Chris Paul or Devin Booker, whoever I wanted, on my second team. And I think Chris Paul, I know I ragged on his MVP case a couple weeks ago, but I still think he's been outstanding. I still think Chris Paul was, a harbinger basically for the Suns' success. I mean, him and Booker, okay, maybe it was a little too harsh on the last episode. Him and Booker are 1A and 1B basically on that team. They're like, they don't work without each other, I don't think. And I think that it wouldn't happen without Chris Paul. So that's why he's on my second team. Dylan, did you have Chris Paul on your third team?
I did, yes.
Okay. What did you like from Chris Paul this year?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a lot recently because we had our little MVP debate. And then, of course, last week on All Defense, I had him on my team. I can't say enough about Chris Paul this year, man. Like, he's been so good at, I think he's found the perfect balance of setting everyone else up for success while also coming up in the clutch when they've needed him to. I mean, he's been a guy that's deferred a lot. Really, even last year in OKC, he was deferring a lot and trying to get everyone involved. But when the time's right, when it's like a close game, he'll come up and he'll, do that patented pull up mid-range jumper and sink it, and I just think he's been fantastic this year. And I'm a little bit sad they didn't get the 1 seed because I think for narrative reasons, it would have been great if they were able to pull that off. But either way, he has had such a great year and he's helped them have such a great year. And we're lucky enough to get to see who they're going to face in the playoffs soon. We'll probably figure it out tonight because whoever loses the Lakers Warriors is probably going to end up in the playoffs either way. So it's going to be fun, man. And I mean, everyone's been talking about Lakers and Suns, but Warriors and Suns, I think, would be a tremendous series as well.
I mean, if you're the Lakers, I mean, wouldn't you kind of rather play? The Suns are just such a bad matchup for the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers are such a bad matchup for the Suns. That's what I meant to say. They're such a bad matchup, Dylan. Like, how are the Suns going to stop LeBron? How are they going to stop? How are they going to stop Anthony Davis? Like, it looks like they're kind of getting the train back on the tracks in Los Angeles. Dylan, just to kind of like mix a little bit of playoff preview in there. Like, I don't know how the Suns. If I'm the Lakers, I don't want to win this game just to beat Steph. I want to win this game so I can face the Suns. And I know that's probably bad because they've had such a good year, but like this team is so poorly equipped to face the Lakers, so poorly equipped. Like we love what Sarge has done, and Frank the Tank, I think it's safe to say, has shocked both of us, but he can't hang with AD.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, as good as the Suns are, like the Lakers' strength really is down low. That's kind of how they built this team, is they have a bunch of size down low. And DeAndre Ayton, poor guy, he would struggle a lot. So yeah, I think I agree with you that they're probably better off facing the Suns.
And I don't want to say that because I think they've had such a great year, but I think that they're just they're kaput if they face the Lakers. I think we're ready to go ahead and move on to the forwards because you had Chris Paul, you had Luka and Kyrie, and I had Kyrie and Chris Paul. So who were your second team forwards?
So I went with Butler and Randall. I mean, we've talked about Randall. It's just impossible to let him stay off this team, or one of these teams. I mean, it's by far been his best season. I don't think his game has changed a ton aside from hitting threes. Obviously, he's shooting 2 more threes a game than any year before, which last year was his previous career high. He's knocking down 41%, man. That's a huge jump. The previous, the best he shot before that was 34% back in New Orleans. Like, it was never a part of his game. He's always been, a guy that's good down low. And he's still good down low. He actually shot not a career low from 2, but it's been his worst percentage from 2 in a while at just 47%, which, the Knicks spacing kind of explains that. There's not a ton of room on that team, but he's been so good still. He's really ran the show well for them, and averaging 6 assists, I think says a lot about how he's been. And I mean, I still have my problems with him. Don't get me wrong. I still think he's a little bit too focused on scoring, and despite having 6 assists, sometimes he won't pass until he feels like he has to. And I'm interested to see in the playoffs how that fares. I would still probably take them over the Hawks personally, but who knows? The Hawks defense is just not good enough, I don't think, to stop this team. But either way, man, he's had a great year, and I'm just fascinated to see the contract situation moving forward with them and what the Knicks decide to do.
Okay, who was your other second team forward? I don't know if I heard the second team forward.
It was Jimmy Butler.
Okay.
Yeah. So we talked about Butler on all defense too, but he's just had a fantastic year. And the Heat made a little push late season. We were wondering if they're going to be the 7th seed or they're going to fall to the 8th seed, what's going to happen. They finished the season off strong and ended up the 6th seed, obviously facing up with Milwaukee. But man, I keep talking about 2-point percentage, but 34% career high from Butler. He's been awful from 3, and that's kind of been happening the past few years. So it just doesn't matter. His 3-point percentage is kind of worthless at this point. He's so good from inside the arc. And also, I didn't even mention this last week, but 2.1 steals per game, career high. He has just been so good on both ends of the floor. And another guy like Chris Paul he really lets everyone else kind of do the work until they need him. he lets everyone else kind of get involved, and then when it's necessary, he'll pull out the necessary jump shot. So just been a fantastic year from Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had Jimmy on my second team as well. I don't know if I said it. I had on when we were discussing him on the first team. I had Kawhi as my other second team forward. He's, obviously we already talked about Kawhi. I'll start with Randall first. Randall was on my third team. We could not have Randall on this team, man. He played basically all the games. He led the league in minutes per game. He was a horse. And I don't know if this is going to be good for him long term, right? We've seen what happens when Tibbs loves his guys. He rides his guys to the ground. And I just hope that this doesn't, hurt Julius long term. But this year, he just has been. And you were talking about how he's not as good from inside the arc, but on pull-up shots, he's taking 8 pull-ups a game. He's shooting 41% on them, which I don't think is that great personally. But on pull-up threes is at 40% on like 1.5 attempts, which I mean, I would guess that he was not that good last year. Like I would guess that he just was not that good last year. He's becoming more brazen with it as the year's gone along too. Like he just is becoming more and more confident in his pull-up. And I think that's, been the secret to Julius Randle's success is just like, okay, you think I'm just going to batter to the rim every time? No, fuck you. I'm going to do a little sidestep. I'm going to get to my left, or I'm going to get to my left hand. I'm going to pull up. And it's worked for him this year. I'd be curious to see if it works for him again next year. But I think that he's just been too good for me to deny. And I think you're right about the assist thing. But at the same time, I think he's clearly a smart player. Like, I think that that's not the issue. The issue is just, okay, I have it going. I'm going to, do the hot hand shit. But we'll see how that goes next year for the Knicks. I'll be curious to see. Just real quick, you said you think the Knicks will beat the Hawks. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, like from what I've seen from them lately, I think they've really gotten a good groove. I mean, I think Barrett has really come along this season. At the beginning of the year, I still was kind of worried about him, but I think he's really figured his game out a lot. And again, there's still issues there, but I think he's figured out how to play off Randall, and Rose has been so good, and Bullock has been so good, and Noel has been so good. Like the Noel and Capella matchup is going to be interesting. It's kind of like Capella and Capella Light in a way. So it's going to be interesting to see how that matchup goes. But yeah, the Knicks defense has been so good this year, and the Hawks defense has not been good. And I think ultimately that's probably what's going to sway it for the Knicks.
I think DeAndre Hunter's back healthy. This week off will probably help him. What if we get a good DeAndre Hunter versus Julius Randle matchup? That might be interesting.
Yeah, that's the little bit of the X factor, I think, because the Hawks have had a great year. Don't get me wrong. Bogdanovich has been so good for them, and like I think Bogdanovich has helped Trey a lot because Trey doesn't have to do all the ball handling, and that's something I mentioned last year. I think where I think the way that Trey becomes the best is if he becomes more like Steph, where he's playing off ball and he doesn't have to make everything for himself. I think that's a better way for him to be utilized. And I think Lloyd Pierce getting fired kind of helped that, because Nate McMillan he's not a guy he's really a ball handling, sharing kind of guy where he wants to move it around a little bit more. And so I think that's helped them a lot. And getting Hunter in there, Hunter has been really good at creating his own shot this year. I mean, I think he's made a lot of strides from just last year. Just creating his own offense, I think he's been really good. And obviously defensively is what he's really known for. So yeah, Hunter is definitely an X factor.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to Jimmy Butler, though, in the interest of time, I think this might be Jimmy's best year in the NBA. And that's crazy to say, but like the Heat were literally floundering before he came back. And let me actually pull up the game log, because what I like about Basketball Reference is they have the player's record in the game logs. So they're 33-19 with Jimmy in the lineup. Like, it's ridiculous. And I think that, so what did they finish on the season? Did they finish like, I don't have the standings pulled up in front of me, but were they, let's see. I don't have the standings pulled up, but if they were like 41-31, that means they were like 8-14 or like something really bad without Jimmy. So he's literally turned the season around. And I think that it's been for the best for them. because they just needed that jolt of energy. And I mean, I think it shows that last year, a lot of people probably thought last year was a fluke because they're like, oh, Jimmy's not that good. Oh, Bam's not that good. And Jimmy is this good. I've always said Jimmy is this good. I would still probably have Jimmy in the top 10, if not top 10, top 12, because top 10 is so deep. But like, I think Jimmy's just absolutely absurd. Like, just the ability that he has. I'll be curious to see. I think the Miami-Milwaukee series is going to be a 6-7 gamer. I don't think it's going to be. I think Milwaukee probably has a little bit of an edge. But I like, based on what we saw last year, I can't count on Miami.
Yeah, I can't either. Again, I still think I'm a little bit worried about the ways they beat Milwaukee last year. They don't have Dragic and Crowder really. Like, they have Dragic, but he's not been as good from three this year, and he's just getting up there in age. And, you know, I think the way that Miami may pull it off is if they just start Hero at point guard, because you don't need Hero to actually play point guard. Like, you have Butler and Bam, they could do all the passing. And I think having as many shooters around those guys as possible is all you need. And their lineups with Hero at point guard this year have been good. So I think that's maybe the way they get in a bit of an advantage. But again, Drew Holiday's addition is going to make it tough for anyone to beat them. And again, like, the ability to put Giannis at the 5 and just have a bunch of shooting around him, I think is going to be a lot different. And, you know, but I think them facing them last year is going to help Bud kind of figure out what went wrong. So we'll see. I do think the Bucks are going to win, but I'm not going to count Miami out either.
Yeah, you brought up Jay Crowder, and that's an interesting point that he goes to Phoenix and they take off and he leaves Miami. And I'm not saying him leaving Miami was the reason they were not as good this year, because, I mean, Jimmy missed 20 games, but I think that Jay Crowder leaving is low-key a huge factor for the Heat. And I think something that a lot of people are forgetting, because he shot like, 40-some% in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs last year. Like, he was ridiculously hot in the playoffs last year. And I mean, Ariza, God, I don't know if we've watched them. I don't think I saw him hit a 3. I don't think I've seen Ariza hit a 3 since he was in Portland last year. Did you remember Trevor Ariza was in Portland last year?
I did. He got hurt before the bubble.
No, he didn't get hurt. He
sat out.
He sat out because that was the 1 month of the year he gets to see his kid. So I didn't get mad at him for sitting out of the bubble. So, but Trevor Ariza can't hit shots like that anymore. And then, you know, you're relying a lot on Andre Iguodala still. And Iguodala and Ariza were both drafted in 04. And I wouldn't be surprised if they hang up the sneakers in the relatively near future. Both of them. Like, I think Iguodala still has a team option next year. But I just wouldn't be surprised if both of them, if not after this season, after the end of next season, both of them are out of the league because they're going to be retired. Because they've been in the league forever. And I mean, neither of those guys are knockdown shooters at this point. I mean, you can make a case Iguodala never was. So I'd be curious to see what happens with on the Heat front, just in terms of like the offense. I think you're right about the Hero thing, but I feel like Hero hasn't been as good as he was last year. I feel not like taking a step back, but he hasn't really gotten better. And the development isn't linear thing, you know, obviously applies. But when I looked up the stats, I was surprised he was averaging 15 points a game. And I think that's a bad sign.
Yeah, and there's been some worries in the media that he is a little bit too involved in the off the court stuff, which I don't think is a bad take, because I mean, he had such a great run last year. Obviously, his name has become a lot more popular, and I think that the white fans like having someone that they can, you know, because Jokic is European, doesn't really count. Kevin Love sucks now. Gordon Hayward is injured all the time. So like the white fans have been looking for that guy, and I think Hero is it. And man, like when you get a song named after you, it can get to your head, man. Look at Mo Bamba. It hasn't been the same for him ever since. So you know, a little bit worrisome there, but we'll see in the playoffs. Hopefully he goes back to what he was last year.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that he's the X factor for them because Duncan Robinson, they can take him out of a game. And there's points where Duncan Robinson is like their only shooter on the floor, which is a bad sign because Bam has 16 feet in out range. Jimmy can hit threes. I'm choosing to believe he's not shooting threes anymore. Like he's just done. He's just operating inside the arc, but we've seen him hit threes when he needs to. I'm not worried about his shooting. I'm just worried about their shooting as a whole. But I like that we can kind of mix some like playoff preview in here into our NBA teams. I think that we've got enough time and space to operate that. But let's go ahead and move on to our next guy, Joel Embiid. We both have Joel Embiid as our second team center. And I mean, really, Dylan, Joel Embiid had a first team All NBA season, but I'm not going to reward him with the first team when he played forward for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, again, the forward thing I think is stupid. Like he's obviously a center, but I mean, again, a great year from Embiid. And if it weren't for Jokic and some injuries, he might be the MVP despite Steph having such a great year. I mean, you know, we talked about Ben Simmons last week and his importance on the Sixers' success, especially on defense. But I mean, Embiid is their best player by far. Like he's the guy. He's the guy, and he is really figured out his game, and he's become a better shooter this year too, which I think has helped open things up a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he's just been a beast, and I'm excited to see their team in general in the playoffs because despite being the 1 seed, it's just we haven't seen them make that leap that everyone thinks that they're capable of making. And you know, I don't know how much it really falls on Embiid rather than everyone else, but I mean, it's going to be interesting either way.
Yeah, Embiid's at 28 points a game, 10.5 rebounds, 1.4 blocks, 2.8 assists. He's getting to the line almost 11 times a game. Honestly, Dylan, if he hadn't gotten hurt, and we were picking MVPs, we are not picking MVPs, but if I was, he'd probably be the MVP for me. Like, he's just been so ridiculous on both ends. Like when we did a battleground halfway through the year and we did the awards picks, and I had Embiid second in the MVP race. That was back when I thought Dame was the MVP. You remember that week when I unveiled Dame as my MVP take? Obviously that aged poorly because the team went on a massive dry spell after that. But Embiid just, if he played 70 or 65 games even, I think he'd be the runaway favorite for MVP just because of like Jokic is a better offensive player, but Embiid's not that far behind, and Embiid's better on defense. So, okay, here's a question for you. If Joel did play 65 games, would he be your first team center or would Jokic be your first team center?
Man, that's tough. I feel like I still would have went Jokic. I don't know. I mean, I think Jokic, what he's done this year, especially after Murray has gone out, has been so impressive. Like, if you take Simmons off this Sixers team, would they have the same success that Denver had? You know, I don't know.
It's a good question. I think you're probably right, but it's just tough because I would say they're about equivalent players at this point. Like whatever Jokic doesn't bring on defense, he adds to your offense. And then whatever Embiid doesn't, what holes, and I'm using quotation marks there because Embiid doesn't have holes on offense other than like maybe he's not as good of a passer as you want. But I mean, that little difference between him and Jokic, and he makes up for it on the defensive end. So I would say they're equivalent players at this point. But I'd say Jokic, we talked about it before, Jokic just has a more conducive to winning games offensive style.
Yeah, and again, the fact that he's like the main offensive hub, I think is a big difference too. It's like, you know, Murray is their point guard, but he's not really, you know. He's just an elite shooter that can create shots. And it's just different for Embiid. He needs someone to get him the ball. And that's not to say he can't create his own shot, but he's better when he's being set up. And again, that's just the nature of the position. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're talking like MVP conversation and stuff like that, I just feel like I'm personally going to always reward the guy that is the better shot creator. And this season, at least, that's been Jokic.
Did you know that Embiid didn't make All NBA last year?
I did not.
That's weird. How many? I feel like he didn't. Hold on. Let's see. 51 games last year, so maybe a little short of like people's cutoffs. But but there was a 70-game season.
Yeah,
that was majority of the season. I don't understand why he got left off. I did not feel like he was. So they had AD, Gobert, and Jokic. AD was first team, Jokic second team, Gobert third team. I don't understand that, but that's just me. I feel like Embiid. I mean, even like he is a lot better this year than he was last year. I would think we could both agree, but I just don't understand that. But in the interest of time, let's go ahead and move on to our third team. So who are your third team? You have Chris Paul as one of your 13 guards. Who's your other guard?
So I just went with Booker, man. I think that he has just been fantastic this year. And as much as I love Chris Paul, and Chris Paul has been huge in the development of Booker, Booker has just kind of like figured his game out in a different way. And it's funny because he hasn't even shot good from three. Like his 3-point shot has really not been much of a factor. He's been really good inside the arc, and he's just figured out kind of the balance of how he wants to handle the ball and score. And I just think he's been tremendous this year. And again, like this was tough because I'll go through it, but there's 6 other guards I considered for this spot. Like guard has just been it was by far the toughest position to figure out. And so again, I understand why you put Luka at forward, because fitting another one of those guys in would have been nice, but yeah, it's tough. And like the guys right behind Booker, very, very close. And if you ask me tomorrow, I might change it even. But I just felt the Suns had such a good year, and, you know, a little bit of narrative, like the Suns and Booker have just been so depressing the past however many years. Like it was just kind of nice to see them flip the switch like this. So yeah, I felt like the Suns deserved a little bit of extra recognition.
So you brought up, so okay, I had Booker as was one of my third team guards. So I'm glad we had that synergy. Booker last year, averaged 26 points a game. The Suns had the 10th highest pace in the league. This year he's at 25, and they're 26th in pace. Like, that means if he was playing on last year's pace, he'd be at like 30 points a game, right? Like if you want to do the math there. And what he's been, you know, their crunch time guy. Like him and Chris Paul split the crunch time duties, but in the like last 2 minutes, it's okay. It's Book's time, right? They both are very capable of creating their own shots. He's a really crafty mid-range scorer. And I just love the way Booker plays. And I think his defense has been okay this year. Like his defense hasn't been a problem at all. And I think that he's been a huge component to the Suns' success this year. And I think that having him and Chris Paul as your third team guards, it completely makes sense. I would guess that's going to be the way a lot of people's ballots goes. I don't think a lot of people are going to have Luka as a forward on their ballots, even though he probably plays more forward than guard, but that's semantics at that point. There shouldn't be positions. I think we both agree on the All NBA. So my other guard, I had Bradley Beal. I think Beal, just the way he can score, like, is just ridiculous. He's so good. And he doesn't get enough recognition. Like, obviously the team took off once Russ kind of took the reins more, but Beal didn't fall off. Russ may have taken the reins, but Beal didn't start sucking. Beal averaged 31 points a game. He just is a ridiculous scorer. I mean, I wrestled with a lot of guards at this last spot too, but I think that Beal to me, that was the main reason I moved Luka to forward, if I'm being honest with you, is I needed to get Bradley Beal on an All NBA team. Booker was actually the last guy I had, but it was a lot easier to justify having Bradley Beal as a guard after moving Luka to forward. So I have to assume Beal is one of your honorable mentions.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it's amazing how he just continues to average more points every year. It's like, are we going to get 35 out of Beal next year? I don't know. But he just continues to ascend, and like he has been tremendous this year. And, you know, the Wizards, moving up the standings at the end of the year. Obviously, Beal wasn't involved in all of it, but I mean, we talked last week, but the Wizards turnaround has just been so impressive, and obviously Beal has been a huge part in that. And you know, I have a little bit of internal conflict here because they're playing the Pacers. It's like I want this Wizards team to be rewarded, but you know, can't root against the Pacers. But and that's why I was hoping they would knock off the Celtics last night. But I mean, either way, even if they fall out of the playoffs, I think they can go home holding their heads high because they've had a great year, especially after how it started.
Yeah. And Beal's efficiency is just ridiculous. Like the 3-point percentage, it's honestly kind of the same thing as Devin Booker. If you think about it, Booker and Beal are very similar players at this point. Like they're both like, oh, you know, these guys are knockdown shooters. So the 3-point percentage doesn't reflect that necessarily. But would you, okay, I don't know if you have, you don't have Beal's basketball reference page pulled up. Would you like to guess Beal's field goal percentage this year?
Let's say like 46.
48.5. On 23 attempts a game. His percentage point jumped up. His percentage from the field jumped up 3 percentage points, basically. Last year he was at 45.5. This year he's at 48.5. And Raul Neto is probably their best spot-up shooter. Like, think about how crazy it is. I know, again, Russ deserves a lion's share of the credit for what they do, right? But Beal deserves the other lion's share of that credit too. Like, he's just ridiculous. He can get to his spots wherever he wants at this point, basically. He's so used to facing triple teams that he just gets shots up over anybody. And when somebody gets him out of Washington, he is going to help somebody win a championship, because this is the kind of guy you need to help you win a championship.
Denver, I'm telling you, man, I will chip in. I don't know what I have to offer the Wizards. I will chip something in to get him on this Nuggets team, man. Like, again, if you have to cash in Michael Porter Jr. in like your next 10 years of draft picks, that's fine. But just imagine Jokic with Murray and Beal. It would be, I think I would watch Denver every single game.
It would be basketball heaven. I'll tell you that much. It would be ridiculously fun. So I don't blame you for that at all. That would be a fun destination for Beal. I think it's time for us to move on to our third team forwards. So, okay, who are your third team forwards? Because you might have had this is probably where we differ. So who are your third team forwards?
So I went with Paul George and Zion. Again, as you mentioned earlier, I just think Paul George has had a really good year and been a little bit overlooked as far as, it's just odd. I don't know. The Clippers talk has just been so muted. It's just weird to me. It's like they're not even, we've talked about pretty much every other team in the West except the Clippers, it feels like. So, and I think some of that was from last year's disappointment, maybe some doubt lingering in there, but I mean, I think they're setting up well right now. And they still have two of the best wing defenders in the league and two guys that are also really good on offense. So again, I think the Clippers are being a little bit overlooked, and Paul George, huge part in that. And Zion, again, like, as much as I hate giving a guy that's been on a terrible team a spot, Zion has just earned it. It doesn't matter what his team has been. I mean, listen to these stats, okay? 27 points a game, 7 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.6 blocks on 61% from the field. I mean, he's just been insane. And, he played 61 games. Like, I think everyone kind of worried coming out of college that he'd have injury problems. And, like, yeah, he had injury problems his first season. And this year, and yes, he ended up getting hurt this year too, but he still played almost the entire season. And if he was healthy, I think the Pelicans would have ended up making the play-in, because they lost 4 in a row and San Antonio lost 4 in a row. And if you had Zion out there, I think they would have caught up to San Antonio. So, it's tough it ended that way, but Pelicans are going to get a good draft pick, man. And the fewer Eric Bledsoe minutes we get, the better the Pelicans are going to be.
Man. So I had Zion on as well. I had Zion as my other third team forward. As you know, Julius Randle was one of my third team forwards. So I I had to have Julius Randle on, right? Like we talked about earlier, I thought he's been great. And then Zion, I had Tatum in this spot until I realized, I looked at the stats. They basically had the same year in stat wise, like just like counting stats. Like Tatum is averaging like 26, 7, and 4 too. But the difference is Zion is at 61% from the field. And that to me, like, I know, again, you're right. They're a shitty team, but you can't deny it. And they've played basically the same amount of games. Tatum's at 64. Zion's at 61. So it was really a wash, right? And the wash, I just went with Zion. You know, I went with what my eyes have been telling me. Tatum and PG were my two toughest cuts, I'd say. So for my last guard spot, I was debating between Booker and Paul George. And I was like, okay, I want to have Paul George on so bad, but I just couldn't find a place to fit him, right? Like I could have had him at guard. I really debated having him at guard, but I just couldn't pull the trigger. I don't know why. He's been great this year. I went through the trouble at the end. I'll give you my all NBA fourth team because I went through the trouble of making all NBA fourth team because I feel like we have that much talent this year, but he made my all NBA fourth team. And I love the way he's been playing. It killed me to not have him on the team, Dylan Hughes. It killed me.
Yeah. I mean, again, great year. And Tatum was my next guy too. And he was actually the only other forward I considered. I was going through the teams. I'm like, again, with LeBron and KD out, it's just a thin field this year. And it's just tough. So Tatum was in consideration for me as well. And, back to Zion real quick. So as you mentioned, Basketball Reference, you get the record when they were out there, and the Pelicans were 3 games under 500 with him out there, which again, with all the spacing issues, I think is pretty impressive out West. And they're still a pretty young team. They finished 10 games under 500. So that means I think they would have been 4-7 without him. So, I mean, again, it's a small sample size, but, they were a lot better with him on the floor than they weren't. And I think we're going to see a massive jump with them next year. But, yeah, Tatum, and it's kind of funny that we're doing this after Tatum drops 50 points.
Right.
It's tough not to bake in the recency bias, but, it's a full season thing. And, obviously the COVID excuse is viable, but it's hard to pass up the guys that we had on the list.
And Tatum had the COVID excuse, but he wasn't bad. He was still great. It just didn't feel more standout than like last year. And it's crazy that I'm saying that because Tatum to me, he was so good this year. The problem was Brown was just as good. And I think, once Brown went out, they really went in a tailspin. And that kind of was a problem to me. And I know Tatum, it's hard to keep a team afloat, especially that one with like practically no depth where Aaron Nesmith and Peyton Pritchard are your like 5th and 6th best players. But I think that it was like a really close call. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. That's basically what it came down to. I just said, fuck it. And I put Zion on the team. So I think any other thoughts on any forwards before we move on to the our last player, the center?
Well, I'm realizing how bad I am at math. The Pelicans 2-9 without Zion, not 4-7. 2-9, like that's pretty telling.
You went to school. You went to school for journalism, not mathematics.
I haven't taken a math class since I was a senior in high school. That's all.
My point exactly. So. we're good at starting statistics, but that's just about it. So okay. So I think that leaves our center. Who is your third team All-NBA center?
So I had to go Gobert. I wanted to do Bam so bad, but I realized I had no Jazz representation. That just didn't feel right. I have my reasoning for not putting the Jazz, and I'll get into that with the honorable mentions, but again, as we talked last week, Gobert, best defender on the best defensive team. It's tough to pass that up. And like stats wise, I still think Bam is more impressive. But it's just the Jazz have been so good this year. I can't leave him off.
Yeah, I had Gobert as my last center as well. Again, I wanted to put Bam on there. I even thought about putting Capella on there, but like just how good he's been. I actually thought about putting Towns on there. I considered a lot of guys, but Gobert to me just was undeniable. I mean, 71 games, and they finished with the best record in the league. And he just was the constant under the rim, deterring guys. And like we said, he has postseason problems, but regular season, this is a regular season award. This isn't, the all NBA playoff team. This is the all NBA regular season team. So he was one of the, I hate to say it, he was one of the 3 best centers this year. So, I mean, as much as we like Bam and as much as we like Capella, he was better than both those guys in the regular season. In the playoffs, it might be a difference. Capella's a destroyer in the playoffs. So, and then obviously Bam is Bam. I think Bam's a better overall player. But I think in the regular season, if I want to win 50 games, I'm going with the Gobert over Bam.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm thinking if you put Bam on this Jazz team, they might get better because he's a good passer and they have such good shooting. I mean, just imagine the ball movement if Gobert isn't like the pick and roll guy. Like if they have just slinging out to the perimeter all the time. I don't know if they would be better in the regular season, but it would be fun as hell. And if you put Bam on this team in the playoffs, like, would they be a Western Conference Finals lock?
Maybe. I don't know. The problem is that Gobert, I heard someone say this on a podcast, and it's honestly the perfect way to put it. Like, he lifts this team. Like, who's the best defender that's not Gobert? It's Royce O'Neal, right?
Yeah.
Like, you would throw Royce O'Neal on a lot of teams, he'd be impactful. But, like, Bojan Bogdanovic, is Joe Ingles a good defender if he's not playing, with Rudy Gobert behind him? Doesn't have that confidence to get in the guy's jersey? Is Donovan Mitchell a good defender? You can make a case he's not. He lifts these guys out of mediocrity and turns them into, good defenders. And I think that, I think the offense with Bam would be out of this world. I can't deny that because they have a ton of offensive talent, but I think the defense would get worse. I don't know. It's tough because I would love to see an O'Neal, Ingles, Bam, Conley, and Mitchell lineup. I would love to see that, just purely speaking. But it's a wash for me. I'll say it's a wash. I could see it really going either way.
Yeah, and the defense probably would get worse. But again, Bam is still an awesome defensive center. And I don't know, the confidence may still be there from those perimeter guys, but I think the uptick in offense you would get, and this is from a team that is like one of the best 3-point shooting teams ever. I think they have 7 guys that have made over 100 threes. Like, that is insane. They're like, I think it was just them in the 2018 Rockets or 2017 Rockets, whatever team that was, that like, that's insane. 7 guys to hit over 100. I mean, and George Niang, one of those guys, by the way, a little bit shocking to me. Like, he's good. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't think he was a 100 3-point make type of guy. But yeah, I mean, I think, add Bam into that rotation. I mean, could we get 7 guys with 200 makes? I don't know.
I think that's a little unrealistic, Dylan. I think that's a little unrealistic, but I mean, you could probably get, 6 guys with 150. I mean, so, okay, just running down the list. Clarkson with 208, Ingles with 183. Ingles, 45% from 3. Ridiculous. Bogdanovic with 180. Mitchell with 178 in 53 games. So Mitchell probably would have broken the 200 barrier if he played like 10 more games. Mike Conley with 138, and he played 50 games, so he probably would have broken 150. Niang played all 72, but Niang's like I don't know how Niang got to 100. I really don't, because he doesn't play that much.
Yeah, that's why it surprised me.
Like, okay. So he played 72 games and played 1,154 minutes. Conley played 51 games and played 1,498. Like, I don't know how. And then Royce O'Neal made 107. And that feels shocking because he was gunning him at the beginning of the year. But I think Bam would lift this team a level offensively. I can't deny that. I just don't think it would be a wash. I would be interested to see it more in the playoffs than the regular season. I think they would finish as like the 6th seed that's really dangerous, right? Like the 6th seed that nobody wants to see. So in the interest of time, Do you want me to give my all NBA fourth team, or do you want to give your honorable mentions?
Let's hear the fourth team.
Okay. So for my guards, I had Trey and Mitchell, with Levine as a hard snub. And then I had Tatum, PG, and Bam. I mean, pretty much all the honorable mentions I had. Any other honorable mentions you want to name?
Yeah, so I put Donovan Mitchell in there. I actually, like, if Mitchell didn't get hurt, I may have actually put him in over Booker. I don't think the stats were that different. And, like, I think they're pretty similar as far as production-wise. I think they were pretty close. And Mitchell was a much better shooter, which may have pushed me over the edge with that. As we already mentioned, Beal. And I put Westbrook, too. Because, you know, the Wizards' run of late has basically been Westbrook-led. Because as I mentioned, Beal has missed some time. So this little push they had up into the 8th seed, like that was Westbrook doing it. And, you know, the average another triple-double, which, you know, I don't care about. Like, it's pretty much normal for him to do that at this point. But still, I mean, he's been tremendous this year. And that shows it. I put Jaylen Brown as well. Just by far the best year of his career, best year of his young career. And again, injury hurts, but he's blossoming into a really good offensive player. And I'm excited to see where he goes over the next couple of years. Simmons was on there. I mean, just not the same offensive player as the rest of these guys. So he's, you know, we had him on our half-season teams, mid-season teams, but just, again, really great defender, but just really he's scoring like less than half than some of these guys. You know, it's just that offensive presence isn't quite the same. Levine, again, tremendous year, just incredibly efficient. And if you gave him Vucevic to start the year, I think they probably would have made the play-in, maybe even easily. I mean, when they got healthy at the end of the year, they were really good. Like, they went on like a 4-game win streak, and they weren't really playing bad teams either. So I'm excited to see where they go next year. And then Bam, as I mentioned, and Capella was in contention as well. I didn't think about Trey Young, but I probably would throw him as an honorable mention as well.
Trey, to me, he was my third guard cut, or he was my second guard cut after PG. Like, it was so tough because Trey, my only problem with Trey Young is just the same thing. It's always been the problem. His defense is so bad. I don't think Bogdanovic is a terrible defender. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's terrible. Danilo probably isn't what you want. They're missing Cam Reddish for the whole year, and they're missing DeAndre Hunter for half the year. But the defense is just a demerit for me, so I took him off. But I'm not going to be mad. Actually, we'll be mad at people who have him on the third team. It's like, yeah, he's great offensively, but just the defense is so bad. It's honestly a demerit. So I don't know if you listed Drew Holiday in there. I had him on my honorable mentions. And then that was basically, the forwards were pretty you listed all my other honorable mentions like guard, but forward there was like none other than the fourth team. So and then I listed Towns as an honorable mention. Sneaky played a good amount of games. I don't actually know if he qualified. I'll look that up real quick. But I mean, when Finch was there, if he had Finch for the whole year, so yeah, Towns played 50 games. If Finch was there for the whole year, he probably would have been at like 26 and 12 and like 6 assists. So I thought he was great after Finch got there. And that was basically half the season, but I didn't think he was good enough before Finch got there to justify having him on the team. So I think that's it. It's time for shameless plugs. So Dylan Hughes, you guys are, I'll do from one young soul to another in a second, but you guys are going to have, we're recording this on Wednesday. This is going to be out on Thursday. Dylan Hughes, you are going to have a Divine Rhyme that is coming out in mere minutes. How are we feeling about the Divine Rhyme this week?
Oh, it was great, man. Like, me and Will both finished it and like had such great energy. And I feel like it may have been our best episode. And I think I felt that way because I was a little bit nervous beforehand. I was like, I feel like this will be a short episode. I just didn't think the content was really the same. But as me and Will started talking about it, it started bringing things out. So it was a really fun episode. I think I mean, fun is the way I would describe it, man. Like, it was fun. So I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah. The way you and Will described it to me individually, it made me very excited for the episode. So I can't wait to listen to it. Again, it'll be out on Wednesday if you're listening to this on Thursday. Make sure you check that out. From one young soul to another. All right, I'm sick of this shit, man. I'm just sick of it. You know, it's not that hard. It costs $7.50 for a paperback, $5 for the Kindle edition. And if you don't buy this book, I'm gonna go to your house. I'm gonna bring in like a bag of dirt, right? I'm gonna go wipe that bag of dirt. I'm gonna like smudge dirt all over your plates. All over them. I'm going to go into your cabinets. I'm going to smudge dirt all over the plates. You're not going to be able to eat. I mean, if you have a lot of plates, you know, how long is it going to take you to wash all that? It's going to be disgusting. I'm Dylan. How does that one compare?
As someone that hates doing dishes, man, that one is really telling. I mean, I'm just imagining scrubbing dishes and like, you know, so you're going to get angry and you're going to scrub one and get enough to eat. And then as soon as you're done eating, you're gonna have to go back and do the rest. It's gonna be really troubling. And all you had to do was spend the money, man. Not that much.
$7.50.
Not that much.
$7.50 for peace of mind and clean plates. You know, it's not that hard. So make sure you buy the book. And then facts and stats. I haven't finished listening to that from JD, but it's really good from what I've heard so far. The episode with you. So make sure you check that out. Also for the Divine Rhyme, Dylan, I don't know if you mind me announcing this for you guys, but I think it's safe to say we're moving forward. You guys are moving forward with Sturgill Simpson for next month. I gave Will, I mean, not that I needed to give him a green light, but I gave him the green light for that. So that'll be exciting for you guys. So I'm glad, you know, I'm glad I could break the news to you, but I got on a call with Will last night. So, and we confirmed that. Battleground, I don't know if Battleground's going to be back. That'll be fun. Circle City Cinema, they're recording tonight as well. So you'll have a double header with us in Circle City Cinema tomorrow. They're going to be doing Fast Five with Bryce and Devin, I believe. So make sure you check that out. And then next week, Boys in the Hood with JD and his brother Jamal. So that'll be fun. Linsanity, they did a podcast earlier this week with Zach and Caleb. That was electric, a play-in preview. There's still time to check it out if you haven't listened to it yet. Or I guess by the time you listen to this, both play-in games will be done. So never mind. But don't worry, because Thursday morning, we're going to be having a recording with Devin Voss and Will Hogsett going over the first 4 play-in games. So that'll be a blast. What else do I have to plug? Triple Option Pass. I don't know when they're going to be back. So this Friday, Caleb and I are going to be hopping on a Zoom and we're going to go live on YouTube. And we're going to draft the playoff series that we're going to cover in each conference. And I'm going to make sure, Dylan, that you get the Clippers Maverick series because I know that's close to your heart. I know you want to see that more than anything. So that'll determine what we're doing on the Power Hour for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be going once a week, and then Linsanity will be going twice a week. So make sure you check that out. And then have I covered everything? Yes, I believe I've covered everything. So Dylan Hughes, you're going to go get your second vaccine shot. I would say have fun, but getting pricked with a needle isn't exactly fun. So have a good rest of your day, buddy. And I'm glad I was able to help you not do this under duress.
You know, I've been getting used to the needles lately because of my whole surgery. Man, I've had a lot of different needles in and out of my arms. I'm starting to feel like a drug addict or something. Like I've just in and out, man. Like I got pricked 2 days ago twice to get blood. It's like I'm just getting used to it at this point. But yeah, the next 24 hours, not necessarily looking forward to it, but I appreciate the well wishes either way.
All that matters is you're recovered for Friday. For the that's another thing too. We're gonna be putting out content for our Running Hook YouTube page on Friday with our we're doing a little get together, Running Hook get together. We're gonna be playing basketball. We're gonna be putting out some content. So I mean, Dylan, they're not gonna want to miss that, are they? No, I mean, me and you coaching. This is our first time to really put our basketball knowledge to the test from a coaching standpoint and really see if we can get the best out of these guys. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. Dylan, this episode was really a blast. I just want to thank you so much for joining me. I just want to thank you so much for having me.